Welcome to the Jamesburg Presbyterian Church. Today is Tuesday, February the 9th, 2021. It's good to know that so many of you are watching this study on the book of Esther. Tomorrow I will be doing a devotional here, and we'll begin that also at noon. And then on Sunday we'll be doing our church service. We expect to be live streaming both on YouTube and on Facebook. Today we are also live streaming on YouTube, and you can watch this video later on Facebook or YouTube. Next week we'll be beginning the Lenten program. It's going to be a reduced program because of COVID. We will be offering a Ash Wednesday service on Wednesday evening, probably at 7 o'clock. And then the following Wednesdays after Lent, we will not be doing anything unless we change our minds. But at this point in time, it's just going to be the Ash Wednesday service. And then, of course, the services during Holy Week right before Easter. But I do plan to turn the devotionals on Wednesday into Lenten-themed devotionals. Today we're taking a look at chapters 5, 6, and 7 of the book of Esther. And these are kind of exciting chapters. There's things that are said in these chapters or information that we're given that sometimes is a bit ambiguous. The purpose of ambiguity in any book is to get us to struggle with the passage in terms of what does it mean, what does it really say. We'll also see a lot of exaggeration as before. In this book, everything is exaggerated, and we will, in addition to that, see once again a king who cannot make up his mind about anything. All right, so up to this time, we have seen an enmity grow between Haman and Mordecai. Mordecai has refused to bow before Haman, so Haman has gotten the king to issue an order having all of the Jewish people in the empire executed on a particular month, on a particular day. And we also know, because we've been introduced to her, Queen Esther. She starts off as a young girl who seems to be taking the direction of others, not able to make a decision for herself, and she now has emerged as a queen who is making decisions and who is creating a strategy to deal with the problem. Last week we took a look at the punchline of the whole book. Who knows but that you are not here for this precise problem to solve it. So Esther has ordered a fast, and that's how chapter 4 ends. All the Jewish people are fasting. We're not told that this is for any kind of religious purpose. We're just told that she's issued a fast. So chapter 5 begins with the fast being over. Esther dresses in the best queenly robes that she can find. She puts on her crown, and she goes to the entrance of the court, and she stands there. And King Ahasuerus sees her and asks her to come in. He offers her the scepter. She comes forward, touches the scepter to acknowledge that he has offered it to her. And he undoubtedly figures out that she wants something. So he says these words, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to 1/2 the kingdom, it will be given to you." Now, the Queen Esther knows that Ahasuerus is a kind of arrogant guy, is full of himself. So she says, "If it pleases you, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet that I have prepared for him." So it would seem that the invitation is simply coming to dinner. We do know that she hasn't seen him in a while, 30 days, she told Mordecai. So she has invited him to dinner. It would seem that that's what she's doing, but actually there's a strategy to this. In the Middle East, back in this time period, while the king would offer to give you something, you would not tell the king what you want. You would give the king something in return first. This makes the king beholding to you. It obligates the king. So she approaches him and invites him to this dinner, and the idea is to obligate him. We would expect to, in our culture today, to say, okay, here's what I want. Can you make it happen? But this is not how things were done back in this day, which indicates to us that Esther has learned how to be a courtier. So they go to Esther's banquet. Haman goes there too with the king. They're seated, and after they consume the food and they get to the course of wine, once again the king says to Esther, "Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to 1/2 the kingdom, it will be granted." At this point in time, we would expect that Esther would get down on her knees and beg for the survival of the Jewish people. But she does not do that. She says, "My petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king," again, acknowledging the king's power, even though he doesn't really have the power because people are advising him all along. "Let the king come along with Haman to a banquet that I will prepare for you tomorrow." So it would seem that she's just inviting him to one banquet after another, but actually this is a way in which she is entrapping the king, and she's entrapping Haman. And the plan works. Haman leaves this second banquet elated, and in the very next section, chapter 5, verses 9 through 14, he summons his family together to boast about all his good fortune. He tells his wife that, and her name is Zeresh, he tells his wife, "I am truly in great shape. I have a wonderful family. I have sons. I have been honored. I'm going to banquets with only the king and queen present, just the three of us. I've made it to the top of my game." He says specifically, "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave." Then he says, however, "I've got a problem." And when he came out of that banquet, he saw Mordecai. Mordecai made eye contact with Haman, but refused to stand, refused to acknowledge Haman's status in this empire, just ignored him, didn't even show reverence or fear. So Haman says to his wife, "What am I going to do?" And she says, "Why don't you build a gallows and have the gallows built so that tomorrow morning you can ask the king to have Mordecai hanged." So we're told that the gallows that are going to be built are 75 feet high. That's 50 cubits. This is an outrageous amount of height. This is the equivalent of a 5-story building. So we're going to hang Mordecai on a 5-story building. The purpose, of course, for the exaggeration is to show that everyone will be able to see Mordecai hanging there. Now, having said that, the Persians were the ones who invented crucifixion. Were they really going to hang him on a gallows with a rope and all that? Or was this more about impalement? The likelihood of it being more about impalement is probable. It's more likely that that's what this is about. So it'd be a single pole, 75 feet high. Where are they going to find that? On which to impale Mordecai. He finds it to be a great idea, and so he decides to have this built. Now, here again, we see the male figures needing the assistance of advisors, and in this case, it's the females in the story who are able to give the best advice. Esther on the one hand is working to save her people. Zeresh, on the other hand, is working to help Haman figure out what to do to Mordecai. So we have very strong female characters in this story. Esther has become the model of a wise courtier. All right, chapter 6 is a very interesting chapter. It starts off with our being told that King Ahasuerus cannot sleep. And so he asks that the chronicles of the kingdom be read to him. These would be like history books. And of course, if you took a course in history in college or in high school, you know that sometimes it can be pretty dry and maybe just what you need when you cannot sleep. But anyway, they get to that exciting part where Mordecai has exposed the two eunuchs who were planning to assassinate King Ahasuerus. And Ahasuerus asks the question, what honor and recognition has Mordecai received for saving my life? And they say, nothing has been done for him. Now, regardless of what Mordecai's situation in life is, it was a huge humiliation for the Persian Empire to not reward him for saving the king's life. So the king says, we've got to fix this. We've got to fix it right now. He says, is there any of my advisors hanging around? And it just so happens that Haman has shown up. So the king says, Haman, I want to honor somebody really special to me. What do you think would be the right way to do this? How should I honor that special person? Now Haman thinks to himself, who more than me could the king want to honor? It must be me. So I will pick wisely. He said, well, I think first of all, you should get out one of your kingly robes and you should have the person you want to honor wear that kingly robe. He said, I think too, you should get out the kingly horse that only the king can ride and have that person ride on the kingly horse with the kingly honors. And the horse itself should wear a crown. Now, we all know from archaeological excavations in the Persian area that horses in that kingdom often wore a kind of headdress when they were doing ceremony. So this is not an outrageous detail here. This would be something that would have been done. He said, then I think one of your top government people should lead this man on the horse. So you're pulling the bridle while the person is sitting on the horse in the kingly robes. And you should have someone walking in front of that whole thing proclaiming what this man did and how that man is honored by the king. And Haman is absolutely convinced that this is going to be what happens. So the king says to Haman, that's brilliant. Go at once, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. This tells us two things. First of all, it tells us that the king plans to honor Mordecai for what Mordecai has done to save the king's life. But even more, it shows us that the king has no idea what peoples he has condemned to death. He's going to honor Mordecai the Jew, and that's the phrase that's here, Mordecai. Mordecai is going to be honored, the king not knowing that his whole ethnic group is to be eliminated from the empire. So Haman does all of that because he has no choice. He's been ordered to do this by the king, and he's smart enough to know that if he doesn't do this, he will be in trouble. So he does exactly this. It must have been hugely humiliating for him to have to lead the horse that's carrying Mordecai, who's wearing the king's robes, with a person walking in front of them, declaring that this is the king's favorite person and what this person has done. It's not Haman in this case who is being honored, but it is Mordecai. So the noble is to proclaim to the entire city the honor given to the man by the king. Josephus adds a detail, and the rabbis also noted this same detail. We find it in the commentary. It's by tradition. It is not in the text itself, but I think it is an interesting addition to the story. And that is that Haman's daughter is looking out the window, and she sees this happening. And she believes that it is her father who's riding the horse and Mordecai leading the horse. So she dumps her chamber pot on top of the leader of the horse, which turns out to be her father. In case you don't know what a chamber pot is, it would be the equivalent of a toilet back in those days. So she's dumped the toilet on top of her father. And then we're told that realizing what she has done, she commits suicide by jumping from the roof. This is not part of the text, but it is part of the story that's recounted by the rabbis and Josephus. Josephus also recounts that Haman wept the whole time he led Mordecai. Haman comes home, and the part about his daughter is not mentioned in verses 12 through 13, but he tells his advisors and he tells his wife what has happened. And Zeresh says to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." So she has prophesied what is going to happen to Haman. It's looking bad for Haman right now. It's looking really, really bad. Haman still has that dinner coming up with Esther. And as a matter of fact, when all this is going on, the people come to get him, to take him to the dinner. But there's no sympathy this time from his advisors. There's no sympathy from his wife. They suspect that this is the beginning of the end. In chapter 7, it starts, I'd like to connect chapter 6, verse 14, the final verse of that chapter, to chapter 7. This is where the eunuchs come to escort Haman to the banquet. And Haman goes to the banquet, and it's the same sort of thing. They get to the wine course, and again, Ahasuerus says to Esther, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to 1/2 the kingdom, it will be granted." She says, "If I have found favor with you, and if it pleases your majesty, O king, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we were merely sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." Well, of course it would justify disturbing the king, but again, she's playing that courtier part, saying that I wouldn't bother you if it wasn't a matter of life and death. The whole thing about being sold into destruction has to do with the bribe that Haman offered King Ahasuerus when he asked King Ahasuerus to enact a law that would allow a group of people to be executed. And the execution is complete. We use those 3 words: destruction, slaughter, and annihilation. So the 3 is to show completeness. Every single Jewish person, regardless of age, regardless of gender, will be destroyed. Ahasuerus does not know what this is all about, has no clue. He says, who did this? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? At this point in time, Ahasuerus realizes that this even includes his queen, his wife, Esther. And Esther says, the adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. The king, two things happen. The king stands up in a rage. He has to get his act together, so he steps out of the room onto a patio. That's what we're told. We're not told exactly why, but we can assume that at this point in time, he is angry. Maybe he is beginning to realize that he's been tricked. Maybe he's starting to put all the pieces together. It would be a first for him in this book if that's the case. Haman, the second part of this is Haman is now terrified. Previous to this pericope, Haman has been told by his wife that this is the beginning of the downfall. And now he realizes that this is more than just the beginning of the downfall. He's in a free fall at this point in time. He is going to now beg for his life. This Haman, who was all so powerful, who's building 5-story gallows to kill Mordecai on, is now begging for his life. So the king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, we don't know that for sure, but the text says has decided his fate, stays behind to beg Queen Esther. Now, here's what happens. There's a kind of visual. It would be interesting to do a play, and this would be one of the most important scenes in the play. Haman, as he gets up to beg Esther, I would imagine that he trips over the carpet, maybe he trips over a piece of furniture. Anyway, in addition to the free fall that he's already beginning and the downfall that is predicted, he falls on top of Esther as the king walks back into the room. And from the king's perspective, this has been hotly debated, but from the king's perspective, it appears as though Haman is now assaulting Queen Esther. The king calls it molesting. In one, the Hebrew word is, the king says, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? In another text, it is assault. In other translations, it's rape. Well, but whatever it is, there's that visual of Haman falling on top of Esther. Now, one commentator suggested that the king has to find reason. So he's making something up. He's jumping to a conclusion, or he's interpreting for his own political reasons why he needs to execute Haman. I think that just the simplest answer is the best answer. It appears to him as though there is an assault going on of some sort, and so he's going to now punish that assault. You cannot assault a queen. You cannot do that. Not in the king's, not anywhere, not under any circumstances, but especially in the king's palace. So one of the eunuchs, Harbana, says, well, I happen to know that Haman is building a gallows, and the gallows is 5 stories high, 75 feet high, 50 cubits high, and it's right next to Haman's house. And he's building it to execute Mordecai, who helped you, who saved your life. The king says, okay, hang Haman on it. And so we see that the prophecy of chapter 6, Haman's downfall, is complete. Ahasuerus has come in, he's caught Haman in what appears to be or an assault, or it's the excuse to do something about Haman. But he has now taken care of the Haman problem, and it is great irony. It's the greatest irony of the book. The very gallows that you build for your enemy is the gallows that you are faced with yourself. Josephus points this irony out in his histories called The Antiquity of the Jews. And Josephus says that the irony is a man prepares a gallows against someone else, and he has, without knowing it, first stored up for himself those gallows. All right, this is where we end today, chapters 5, 6, and 7. Next week, we're going to take a look at chapter 8, and this is the beginning of the solution to the problem of how do you repeal a law that cannot be repealed. And then chapters 9 and 10 talk about the religious significance of this, the fact that this is a holiday. So we're going to see some good things happen next week in chapter 8, and then we'll finish up this whole book the following week on February the 23rd. Thank you very much for your attention today. It is great to know that there are people watching me. I'm humbled by your presence in Facebook land and on YouTube land. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay well. I will see you soon.